Welcome back. We've spent 2 videos on the challenge: the science, the goals, the social floor, and the environmental ceiling. Now at last, we bring in finance. This section is about the financial system itself, what it actually does, and how each of its functions can be turned towards sustainability. And it's here that we'll meet the central framework of this whole part: the 3 stages of sustainable finance. So this is the pivotal section. Let's do it justice. And if you like what you see here, subscribing to the channel means you won't miss any of the upcoming videos. Let me start with the guiding question for this section. How can the financial system facilitate decision-making on the trade-offs between economic, social, and environmental goals? Notice the word trade-offs. Very often these 3 goals pull against each other: a cheaper product versus a cleaner one, a quick profit versus a durable one. Finance at its best is a machinery for weighing such trade-offs, pricing them and directing capital accordingly. The question is whether we can point that machinery at sustainability. To answer it, we first need to know what the machinery does. Before we list those functions, this slide from Roncalli sets out the motivations behind ESG, the reasons different actors engage with environmental, social, and governance factors at all. Some are driven by values and ethics, some by risk management, some by regulation, some by client demand or reputation. Keep this spread of motives in mind because it explains why institutions behave so differently. Attention we'll formalize shortly as the stages of sustainable finance. Here are the 5 classic functions of the financial system. This is textbook finance, and it's worth knowing cold. First, produce information about possible investments in advance and allocate capital accordingly. Second, monitor in advance and allocate capital accordingly. Second, monitor those investments and exert corporate governance after the money is provided. Third, facilitate the trading, diversification, and management of risk. Fourth, mobilize and pool savings. And fifth, ease the exchange of goods and services. Now look at the note on the slide. The functions most relevant for sustainable finance are the first 3: allocating capital, exercising governance, and managing risk. These are precisely the levers through which finance can steer the real economy toward or away from sustainability. That's the answer to our guiding question in embryo. This slide gives us a framework, a scaffold on which the rest hangs. The idea is to connect those financial functions to sustainability outcomes. Capital allocation directs money toward or away from sustainable activities. Governance lets investors influence corporate behavior. Risk management prices in environmental and social risks. It becomes fully concrete once we've drawn the contrast between the traditional view of finance and the sustainable one, which is exactly where we go next. Let's state the traditional view crisply, so we know precisely what sustainable finance is reacting against. In the standard textbook, the goal is profit maximization, which translates into maximizing shareholder value, achieved by finding the optimal combination of financial risk and return. And notice, only one factor is considered. Call it factor F, the financial factor. Social and environmental factors simply aren't in the objective. The intellectual figurehead here is Milton Friedman, whose famous 1970 line was that the business of business is business. The only social responsibility a firm has is to earn profits. And charity is a private decision for individual citizens, not for corporations. One more empirical note on the slide. Traditional finance often uses overly high discount rates, especially in the UK and the US, which is evidence of myopia, of short-termism. That short-termism will turn out to be one of sustainable finance's central complaints. This slide from Roncalli frames the whole debate as 2 opposing theories, and it's worth learning them as a matched pair. On one side, Friedman, 1970, and shareholder theory. Corporations have no social responsibility to the public or to society. Their only responsibility is to their shareholders, meaning profit maximization. The relevant metric here is corporate financial performance, CFP. On the other side, CFP. On the other side, Freeman, 2010, and Stakeholder theory. Corporations create negative externalities, and therefore they do have social and moral responsibilities to employees, customers, communities, and the environment, not just shareholders. This view shows up in the cost of capital and in business risk, and its relevant metric is corporate social responsibility, CSR. So, Friedman versus Freeman, shareholder versus stakeholder, CFP versus CSR. That opposition is the axis this entire part turns on. Now we build the central framework. 3 stages of sustainable finance. Here is the first, SF 1.0, refined shareholder value. The very first step institutions take is simply to avoid investing in or lending to so-called sin companies, firms with very negative impacts. In the social domain, the classic examples are companies selling tobacco or anti-personnel mines and cluster bombs, or those exploiting child labor. In the environmental domain, the classic examples are waste dumping and whale hunting. And more recently, some institutions have added coal, and even the broader category of fossil fuels, to their exclusion lists because of carbon emissions. Notice the logic, though. This is still fundamentally about shareholder value. It's refined because it screens out the worst offenders, but the objective hasn't really changed. You're still maximizing financial value, just with a short exclusion list bolted on. The second stage, SF 2.0, goes deeper. This is stakeholder value. Here, financial institutions explicitly incorporate negative social and environmental externalities into their decision-making. Why would they? 2 reasons. First, over the medium to long term, those externalities might become priced. Think of a carbon tax, or might damage the institution's reputation. Incorporating them therefore reduces the risk that an investment becomes unviable. And notice a subtle point. This risk depends on the maturity of the instrument, so it's greater for equity, for stocks, than for debt like bonds and loans, because equity is exposed for longer. Second, on the positive side, internalizing externalities helps firms restore trust, which is simply the mirror image of reputation risk. And by attaching a financial value to social and environmental impacts, you make it possible to optimize across all the different aspects at once. So SF 2.0 still has a strong risk and return logic, but it now genuinely weighs the interests of stakeholders, not only shareholders. The third stage, SF 3.0, is the most ambitious, common good value, and it involves a real shift in mindset, from risk to opportunity. Rather than merely avoiding unsustainable companies out of caution, institutions here invest only in sustainable companies and projects. Finance becomes a means to foster sustainable development, funding healthcare, green buildings, wind farms, electric car manufacturers, land reuse projects. The starting point flips entirely. Instead of an exclusion list, as in SF 1.0, you build an inclusion list, positively selecting projects for their potential to generate social and environmental impact. In this way, the financial system actively serves the sustainable development agenda over the medium to long term. But note the discipline at the bottom of the slide. An important component of sustainable development is still economic and financial viability. SF 3.0 is not charity. The projects still have to work financially. So there's your framework. 1.0 refines shareholder value with exclusions. 2.0 incorporates externalities for stakeholders. 3.0 positively pursues the common good. Learn these 3 stages well. We'll use them for the rest of the course. This slide invites a discussion worth actually having. Weigh the pros and cons of each approach. 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Where are we now, realistically? And debate the deep question, exclusion versus inclusion. Is it better to screen out the worst or to positively fund the best? There's no single right answer. Each stage has genuine strengths and limitations. But holding the 3 side by side is the best way to see what each one is really committing to. So where are we now, empirically? The honest answer is not very far along. The majority of firms are still at the SF 1.0 level, putting financial value. Majority of firms are still at the SF 1.0 level, putting financial value first. Roughly 30 to 40% of financial institutions and 20 to 30% of corporates adopt sustainable principles in their investment and business practices. And even those firms are only partly maximizing integrated value. That fraction the slide calls fraction A. In other words, they sit somewhere between SF 1.0 and 2.0. The takeaway is sobering but important. The three-stage framework describes a direction of travel, not the current reality. Most of the journey still lies ahead. Here's a genuinely subtle question. Why do companies act ethically at all? Two competing explanations, and they run in opposite causal directions. The first, doing good by doing well. Only well-performing, profitable firms can afford to invest in sustainability. So profitability comes first. And good behavior follows. The second reversed, doing well by doing good. Responsible corporate behavior may itself increase profitability and firm value. So good behavior comes first and profit follows. Both are plausible and both surely happen. But here's the catch the slide flags. Neither can explain the cross-country and cross-firm variation. Why do some firms care so much more than others, even in the same industry? That puzzle points us beyond profitability alone, towards something structural. And that structural something turns out to be, strikingly, legal origin. There's a strong correlation between a country's CSR practices and its legal origin. Specifically, firms in common law countries show a lower level of CSR than firms in civil law countries, and civil law firms are more responsive to CSR shocks than common law firms. This is a genuinely surprising empirical finding, that something as deep and slow-moving as a country's legal tradition helps predict how socially responsible its companies are. It tells us that CSR isn't only about individual firms' choices, it's embedded in national institutions. Let me unpack why legal origin matters so much. Different countries conform to different legal systems, and that legal origin shapes both a firm's own decision-making and the regulatory behavior of its government. The Anglo-Saxon common law tradition tends to favor fewer restrictions and strong shareholder protection, which sits naturally with Friedman's shareholder view. The continental European civil law tradition, by contrast, is associated with more state intervention and a stakeholder view, which sits naturally with Freeman. So the Friedman versus Freeman debate we drew earlier isn't just abstract philosophy. It's partly baked into whether a country runs on common law or civil law. That's a powerful and slightly humbling idea. This slide pictures the shift we've been building toward, value creation moving from an old vision to a new one. On the left, financial value creation in traditional finance, a single dimension, F, over a short horizon. On the right, long-term value creation in sustainable finance, multiple dimensions, financial, social, and environmental, over a long horizon. Two things change at once as you move from left to right, what you count and how far ahead you look. That combination, more dimensions, longer horizon, is the essence of the transition this whole part describes. Which brings us to the barriers. This slide asks, what is the single most important obstacle to sustainable finance? And it offers two candidate axes. The first is value, shareholder value, meaning profit versus the common good. The second is horizon, short-term versus meaning profit versus the common good. The second is horizon, short-term versus long-term. My own view, and I'd encourage you to form yours, is that these two are deeply linked. Short-termism and narrow shareholder value tend to travel together, and so do long-termism and the common good. If you had to fix just one, which would it be? That's a question genuinely worth sitting with. Let me gather the key takeaways of this section. The core shift in sustainable finance is from finance as a goal, profit maximization, to finance as a means to support the transition to a sustainable economy. That transition, especially to a low-carbon economy, can move surprisingly fast. Think of how air pollution in California drove regulation, which in turn accelerated electric cars and solar power. And here is finance's distinctive contribution. Finance is about anticipating future events and pricing them into today's investment decisions. Done well, that means finance can actually speed up the transition, pulling the future forward into present-day prices. But it requires the right kind of capital, long-term, patient capital, willing to wait for value that takes years to materialize. The full list of references for this session is on screen and in the video description, including Liang and Renneburg on the foundations of corporate social responsibility, Kruger on corporate goodness and shareholder wealth, Friedman's classic 1970 essay, and Roncalli's 2023 lecture notes. Do have a look if you'd like to go deeper on any of the ideas we've covered. Let's recap this pivotal video. We laid out the 5 functions of the financial system and saw that 3 of them, capital allocation, governance, and risk management, are the real levers for sustainability. We drew the fundamental opposition between Friedman's shareholder theory, with its focus on corporate financial performance, and Freeman's stakeholder theory, with its focus on corporate social responsibility. And we built the central framework of this part, the 3 stages of sustainable finance. 1.0, refined shareholder value through exclusion. 2.0, stakeholder value through internalizing externalities. And 3.0, common good value through positive inclusion-based investment. We saw that most firms are still at stage 1, that legal origin helps explain who moves further, and that short-termism is the deep barrier. In the next video, we open the internalization subdeck, what externalities really are, and how precisely we might bring them inside the market. See you there. And that brings us to a close. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, hit subscribe so the next video reaches you too.